Hello, my name is Thomas Paine, and I'm almost 290 years old, and I owe it all to clean living. In 1776, I wrote a book called Common Sense, in which I talk about how people should rule and think for themselves. Almost all patriots read it, and I'm called the father of the American Revolution. I think I'm allowed to call myself a patriot. I'm going to record a series of videos on the issues and divisions in the America I love. This one's on voting. Now, since my fellow founding fathers established this country, free and fair voting and respecting those votes has been the bedrock on which our national building has been built. But after 250 years, it seems that some people want to blow up that bedrock. There are three ways that right-wing Republicans, and sadly it is the party of Lincoln that is responsible, are doing this. The first way is by changing the way state electors who are responsible for certifying the results of a presidential election are chosen. Instead of having these electors chosen by a governor or political leadership in a state, and who are pledged to vote for the candidate who wins the majority, Republican activists are trying to have Republican legislatures, partisan election boards, and partisan secretaries of state elected who will appoint electors who will only certify Republican candidates for Congress. Republican extremists are thus taking over state election machinery in many states. Steve Bannon, a radical advisor in Trump's White House, recently issued a call to action for volunteer precinct officers to oversee voting in their communities. In some places, it will be a crime to obstruct their vision. Intimidation, anyone? In 7 out of 8 presidential elections since 1992, Democrats have won the popular vote. But because of the Electoral College favoring rural states and a right-wing Supreme Court, this has not been a democratic age. In the 2000 election between George Bush and Al Gore, the vote was so close that the Supreme Court had to decide, and they decided for Bush, but Gore accepted those results. Congress could also decide who wins a presidential election if there is a dispute. Do we want partisan radicals to decide this? Of course, it would be hypocritical for people who want to decrease federal power to have Washington decide this. But what's a little hypocrisy when one has intense desires? A little slow-motion coup against our democracy. The second way that free and fair voting rights are being eroded is gerrymandering. This is the process of changing the boundaries of congressional districts so that people who disagree with you are spread out among many districts, so your opposing candidate cannot possibly win. Another way of gerrymandering is to draw districts where all the people that you disagree with are stuffed into one district so that the other districts can vote people that you agree with. Gerrymandering eliminates the need for compromise among a diverse electorate, makes more extreme politics, and encourages gridlock. Sound familiar? Politicians choose the voters this way instead of the voters choosing the politicians. In Tennessee, the legislature split Nashville, which has been Democratic for 147 years, almost as old as I am, into 3 districts which include Republican rural areas. Nashville will now be represented by a conservative congressman. 25% of Alabamans are black, but there's only one black majority district out of 7. 90% of the 2022 congressmen will be from non-competitive districts. No compromise, no hearing from diverse points of view. The third way fine and fair elections are being threatened is the issue of fraud. Republicans claiming that their opponents are committing fraud without evidence, and ironically, committing fraud themselves. Before the 2020 election, Governor Mario Cuomo of New York predicted that if the Republicans lost the 2020 election, they would cry fraud. That's exactly what they did. Wow. Of course, there were no claims of fraud in 2016 when Trump won, and there were no claims of fraud in the congressional races in 2020. Only Biden votes were fraudulent. Scores of Republican nominees are running for office who deny the outcome of our perfectly clean 2020 election. 12 secretaries of state, 18 state governors, 18 state attorney generals, and 13 congressmen or women. That's a lot. Now, we've always had clean elections. In Texas, it's more likely to be struck by lightning than for voter impersonation to occur. Out of millions of votes, 15 fraudulent votes were found in Kansas and 75 in Florida. 3 wealthy conservative vote fraud sleuths have weighed in. Thank God. 3 million non-citizen votes in Texas were found, but without evidence. Italian satellites have erased Trump votes. A participant in the attempted January 6th coup looked for fraud in Arizona and found 360 more votes for Biden. Oh dear. A Republican election official in Wisconsin consulted a conspiracy theorist who said that every state lost 4.2% of Trump votes. This is based on the number 42 from a book published in 1979, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Well, that's a relief that someone is onto this. Now for the promised irony. Extremist Republicans have actually practiced fraud against voters who might, horrors, vote against their wishes. Some examples. After losing the 2020 election, the Trump White House considered calling for the National Guard to seize voting machines and asking the Defense Department to come up with possibilities of keeping Trump in power. Extremist Republicans threatened Pence's life during the insurrection if he failed to certify the 2020 electoral count. Michigan, Indiana, and Texas have purged voters, often without notification, or rejected mail-in ballots. These actions have affected 13 to 19% of voters and are often based on technicalities. Elsewhere, it is a crime to help voters, and one state makes it a felony to help citizens whose English is poor. Minorities, the disabled, and the elderly often have difficulty taking time off from work and don't have easy transportation, so going to a polling place can be hard. Mail-in ballots and mail-in ballot boxes are the solution, but many states are making people submit mail-in ballot requests in person or disallow anyone to submit a ballot for another person, making the use of mail-in ballots useless. Drop boxes have been eliminated in many areas, and using them for ballots is now illegal. The 2020 national census miscounted millions of people, overcounting whites and undercounting minorities. Many of these people vote Democratic. Surprise! The last bit of fraud is the intimidation of election officials who have overseen clean elections for years. Officials are resigning because of the threat of fines, prosecution, and violence if they do not toe the Republican line. One judge was killed in his home. A veteran electoral officer said it's isolating and scary to have her job. She got one voicemail that threatened to convict your piece of shit ass and hang you in the town square. Republicans seem to want to normalize unnecessary reviews of our clean elections and make ridiculous accusations part of normal political life. Intelligent leaders know they're lying. Are their opinions and careers really more important than our democracy? A democracy that is backsliding, according to one international agency. For the first time in American history, the loser of the 2024 election may not concede power. The Democrat will, but what about the extremist Republican? This is a crisis. MAGA? Anyone? Thanks for listening.